Hello, my name is Frank Krumkowski of Our Revolution Helena. We're a group that's been in existence here in Helena for the last 5 years, meeting every 2 weeks, working on issues of economic justice, climate change, affordable housing, women's rights, Native Americans' rights. And we've been doing programs here on Helena Civic TV for the past 2 years. This is our 29th program. We've done programs recently on homelessness and affordable housing in Helena, on Initiative 187, which is an initiative that some folks are trying to put on the ballot for clean energy in Montana, renewable energy. And today we're going to talk about an important project that's happening right here in Helena. And it's a group that is called Helena's Ready for 100%. This is a coalition of organizations, businesses, and individuals who are committed to making Helena 100% powered by clean, renewable energy by the year 2030. And we're very fortunate to have as a guest today Brian Fady, who works for the Montana Environmental Information Center as their program director for clean energy. And he is one of the leaders in the group called Helena's Ready for 100%. So let's turn right to Brian. Thank you very much for being here, Brian.
Thank you for having me.
Ready for 100%. Well, what's that all about, and why are we here to even talk about this?
Yeah. Well, the origins really were last summer in particular, summer of 2019, and a group of folks around town in Helena here started getting together and talking about what sort of action can we take locally around climate change. You know, we know that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and start doing it pretty quickly and reducing them by a great deal in the next decade or so. And, you know, in 2018, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this collaboration of thousands of scientists around the United States and around the world, they look at the climate data, they make predictions about how things are going to go if we don't make changes. And you know, a couple of years ago, they came out with a report that was really startling to people around here, around the country, around the world. We need to drastically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 in order to just level off the effects of climate change. And so when that came out a couple of years ago, people were really concerned. Last summer, we got together and started looking at what our options might be. And you know, we looked around the country and saw what other cities were doing. At the time, around 70 cities in the United States had passed resolutions or set goals for their city of reaching 100% clean energy by a certain year. A lot of them, you know, 2030, 2035, they varied on their timeline, but the same basic premise. Now today, there's actually more than 150 cities that have set this kind of goal of reaching 100% clean energy. And so, you know, our group of folks, we thought, well, if they can do it, we can certainly do it here as well.
Yeah. So at the federal level, we know that there have been various plans put forth, but during the Trump administration, it seems like all those ideas have been derailed by President Trump and his people who apparently think this is a hoax or something.
Right, yeah, and that was another big sort of catalyst to this local movement, was when we looked sort of above us in the chain of command of who can take action on climate change. The federal government is trying to take us backward right now. You have the Trump administration that pulled the country out of the Paris Climate Agreement. There was something called the Clean Power Plan that had been developed under the Obama administration, and the Trump administration just basically set it aside. You look a chain down at the state level. I do a lot of lobbying at the state legislature. I can tell you that that body is trying to take us backward. They're trying to subsidize fossil fuels or keep coal plants running longer. And so, you know, these sort of levels above us here in Helena are trying to take us backward. And that was, again, one of the things that brought us together, was saying, what can we do here to try to take us forward and to have some positive action?
So I saw from some of the information that you had provided on the internet previously that as you said just a while ago, that more than 150 cities have passed resolutions setting a 100% clean renewable goal of some kind by 2030 or 2035. And you listed Spokane, Boise, Idaho, Salt Lake City, Park City, Utah, Moab, Utah, Fort Collins, Colorado, Columbia, South Carolina, Fayetteville, Arkansas. And so are we trying to do this in Helena?
We are, yeah, and that's the Ready for 100 movement is really culminating at this point around also trying to get a resolution passed by our city commission here. And another cities to point to is the city of Missoula, as well as the county of Missoula passed a similar resolution in 2019. That was another bit of inspiration for us here. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we've really focused our efforts. We had a big kickoff rally in September of 2019. It was part of a worldwide day of climate action. There were these climate strikes all over the country, all over the world. We had one here in Helena on the front steps of the city-county building. It was a great event. We had more than 200 people there. People of all kinds, young and old alike, were there, and really, and at the time, that was our kickoff for trying to get a city resolution passed, specifically the 100% by 2030 goal.
That was a great event. I was there, and I would say probably 300 people were there on the steps and across the street. I mean, you could not fit all the people on the steps of the city-county building. And that was a great kickoff with some folks who are members of our Revolution Helena. I were part of the speakers and the MC, Matt Treaster, for example. So if we are working on this resolution in Helena, we're not going to be alone. We've got lots of allies and partners, even though at the federal level we can say we're kind of disappointed, to say the least, about what's happening there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So what about nearby states that have taken some action or not, just in terms of states, before we turn back to Helena?
Yeah. You know, the concept of reaching 100% clean energy is relatively new in sort of the policy field. Really only about 4 or 5 years ago, I think Hawaii was the first state to set this goal. But since then, many other states have followed. And then utilities as well are setting the goal for themselves and really validating that this is a achievable goal. And when you look around the West, in particular, more than half the states have set this kind of goal for themselves, or the largest utility in their state has set the goal for themselves. In the region, Idaho Power, for example, it's the largest utility in Idaho. It last year set a goal of 100% clean energy by 2045. Or in Colorado, Xcel Energy, same goal, 100% clean energy. I think theirs was 2050 at the time. New Mexico, Arizona, California, Washington State, Nevada have all either passed laws or had their big utilities set these goals. So we would really be joining our peers across the West. And in this idea of 100% has really become validated quite quickly.
And so people easily get discouraged when they listen to the news and see that one disaster after another has happened. But there really are good things that are happening in terms of the climate crisis, response to it, and people taking action. One of the examples in the literature that I've seen from Helena Ready for 100% is Spokane, Washington. What do they do there?
Very similar story. The city of Spokane, there were residents there that were concerned about climate change and wanted to do something. They got together with their city council there, and they ended up passing an ordinance, which is even stronger than a resolution, calling for 100% clean energy by 2030. And what they found in talking with people who worked on that effort, it ended up resulting in a collaboration, good communication with their local utility, a company called Avista. And shortly after the city set its goal, the local utility Avista followed suit and set its own goal of 100% clean energy, I think by 2035 was for them. And so it showed an example of how just going through the process within the city of having those conversations can spark positive collaborative efforts.
Yeah, so a company which might not have taken an action was through its internal processes got pressure and then responded positively.
Yeah,
That's very cool.
And same thing happened in Idaho at the city of Boise. There went through the same process. Local folks wanted to take this kind of action, and the city passed its resolution, 100% clean energy by, I think it was 2035 for them. And then their local utility, Idaho Power, again, in talking with advocates who worked on it there, this process opened up communication, it opened up dialogue, it started some collaboration, and the local utility, Idaho Power, set its own goal shortly thereafter. So, I think this has the potential to have that sort of positive, collaborative, instigating effort here as well.
And since when we're getting discouraged, we need good examples. Why don't you mention what's happening in Utah as well?
Great example in Utah. Last year, 2019, they had a bunch of cities in their state pass these similar resolutions, 100% by 2030. Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, Moab, Oakley, and a few others. And their local utility, Rocky Mountain Power, one of the parties initiated a dialogue between the utility and the cities, and they had a collaborative effort there. They actually brought a bill to their legislature last year, and it was sort of creating new options for how the cities might reach their goal. And they got that bill passed. Utah has a Republican-controlled legislature, a Republican governor. Much of this bill is about climate change, and yet they were able to get a positive bill passed through their legislature and signed into law because you had the cities, you had the utilities, all coming together on something that they could agree on, that it didn't force any changes with the bill itself, but it just unlocked some future potential options. And now, they're going through that. But it's a good example of how these sorts of efforts by the cities and the resolutions can lead to positive outcomes.
Well, I can maybe ask you, Noel, just about what's happening in Montana with the legislature and with the Public Service Commission and groups that have some power over energy policy. But let's turn to one more good example of Arizona, because I know that you've mentioned that there's some good things happening in Arizona.
Yeah, this was just a couple weeks ago in January. Their largest utility company called Arizona Public Service self-committed to 100% carbon-free energy. It was either 2045 or it was 2045, that's right. And it was interesting seeing the comments of their CEO when they made this announcement, talking about how they saw it as, they didn't have the exact step-by-step map of how they were going to reach the goal 100% by 2045, but they saw it as the initiation of a dialogue and of a process. I think he talked about having it start a constructive policy dialogue to see what they could do maybe at their Public Service Commission or at their legislature to unlock some options for their customers. It was a good show of leadership. There was no state law that required them to do it, no federal law. The company saw that there was an opportunity where they could make progress in what a lot of their customers are asking for, which is more clean energy, less impact on our environment, and they set the goal. I think that's a great example of leadership on this issue.
So in the information that Helena Ready for 100% has put out, there was a phrase called clear goals, organize our energies and skills to solve problems. And you also quoted as part of that thought, a fellow that I can remember voting for. No, I didn't vote, but I was just in high school, but I was part of the John F. Kennedy high school supporters. And he said on a similar topic, this is a big thing. This is a potential disaster for the Earth and our planet and for our kids and so forth. But there are big projects that we have accomplished. And he said, John F. Kennedy said back in 1962, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. So it sounds like the project that you're talking about is trying to mobilize those energies And it's actually starting, and it's not something that we're just thinking about doing next week, but it's happening.
Yes, absolutely. And the beauty of setting a goal like President Kennedy did, it was everybody knew what the goal was and by when you wanted to achieve it. By the end of the decade, we are going to the moon. And then that serves as the focus point for all of the wonderfully talented engineers and scientists and everybody else in the process to make it happen. And similarly, I think with this sort of goal, we are hoping that it spurs our local utility. If you're in Helena, you only receive energy from Northwestern Energy. That's just the way it is here. We are hoping that this sort of goal will help spur the wonderfully talented engineers and linemen and lawyers and all the folks who work in that company to move in that direction. And this, again, is setting a clear goal. What do we want? 100% clean, renewable electricity. When do we want it by? 2030. And you can sort of work backward from there. And it helps remove people's sometimes natural inclinations to shut down ideas and not put their minds to work about how to solve problems. And you sort of set that aside and you say, well, if you had to do it, how might you do it? And it's amazing, American ingenuity, what can happen with the wonderfully talented people in this country and what we can accomplish when you set aside those initial roadblocks and say, well, what if we had to? What if we wanted to try to do this? How might we do it? And ideas start coming.
Mm-hmm. And I know a few years ago, people were saying, well, these alternative forms of energy are not cost effective and they just don't compete with coal. We've got to stick with coal because we can't afford these other kinds of things, or we need to hang on to natural gas. What are your thoughts about that? And what is Northwest Energy, which is our power company, doing that is good to give them praise for, or something that needs to be changed?
Yeah, part of what makes this particularly attainable is that Montana has one of the best wind energy resources in the country. We rank between second and fifth best in the country. Mm-hmm. We have very low cost wind energy now. And a great example of that, the latest power plant to come online in Montana just a couple weeks ago mm-hmm. is a wind project called the South Peak Wind Farm. It's east of Great Falls, maybe about an hour east of Great Falls, and it's producing energy at $22 per megawatt hour. Now, to put that into context, that is the cheapest power plant that Northwestern has now, is a wind farm at $22. Their most expensive power plant, by contrast, for their customers, is the Colstrip coal-fired power plant that produces at about $74 a megawatt hour. So the cost of wind energy, the cost of solar energy have come down just dramatically. Mm-hmm. We're seeing very low cost solar projects signing contracts around the West. And the question really now, because of this new dynamic and the technological advancements, is not how much will this cost us, but how much is this going to save us mm-hmm. if we implement this? Mm-hmm. And then of course, a goal like this helps spur on more energy efficiency as well. What can we do within the city, either at city-owned properties or incentivizing energy efficiency throughout the community, which is always a money saver.
Mm-hmm. I know in the last legislature in 2019, I guess that was our last legislature, there were lots of bills that were there was one particular bill that was talking about keeping subsidies going for Colstrip and of not moving away from Colstrip. But that was a controversial thing in the past legislature. Yeah. But is Northwest Energy now doing some good things about Colstrip or natural gas, or what are they doing that you would say is not so good?
Yeah, well, the latest right now, as you may have seen, is Northwestern is trying to buy more of the coal-fired Colstrip power plant and put more of that coal electricity into our mix. The company is also very interested in doing more natural gas-fired power plants, which, while those burn a little cleaner than coal, they still produce significant carbon dioxide, and there's great concern about methane that leaks throughout the whole process of mining up natural gas from the ground and transporting it to power plants. There's a lot of methane that leaks in that process, and turns out they are quite harmful to efforts to curb climate change. So unfortunately, the company is trying to go down that route of more fossil fuels, and this effort here in Helena is part of an effort to express to the company what its customers want, the direction that its customers would like to go. And that's where not only is this an effort in Helena, but Missoula City and County have passed a resolution like this. The mayor of Bozeman has issued a proclamation there calling for 100% clean energy by 2030. We know that there's folks in Great Falls that are working on improving their energy situation there. And you start to look at all of those cities are entirely Northwestern Energy customers. That's just how it works. Northwestern is their only option. So you can start to see where if all of these different customers around the state are trying to tell the company the direction they want to go, hopefully that can have an impact on the decision making, not only within the local utility, but with their regulators, the Public Service Commission or the legislature even,
Well, we have just a couple minutes left, so that I'd just like to ask you, what's the next step in terms of meetings or what people can do? I understand February 24th is a big date in this process. What is that all about?
Yes, next Monday, February 24th, the City Commission will vote on whether to adopt this resolution. So it starts at 6 p.m. at the City County building. And the agenda is not out at the moment, but should probably, if folks want to attend and give public comment and support, which we hope they do, showing up at 6 p.m. is a good idea. And then, should they pass it, which we've had very good feedback from the commissioners and the mayor so far, we're going to get into implementation. And I know some of the commissioners are particularly interested in what steps can we take concretely within the city soon to improve our energy mix. And in my mind, you start looking at energy efficiency efforts within city buildings. That's always a money saver. And you can look at rooftop solar on city properties as well, which would also be a money saver. You do the cost analysis before you pull the trigger on putting solar on a building, and you'll know in advance what it's going to cost, how much will it save, how many years will it take to get that payback, and then it's purely just energy savings and dollar savings for the city.
So I understand there's also a call for people signing a petition that would go to the city commission rather.
Yes.
How's that going?
Going well. We are over 500 signatures now on that. If you Google search Helena Ready for 100, you'll find it. It's an online petition.
Okay.
We have more than 25 businesses and community organizations who have signed as of this morning. I think we're at 29 right now, and we're working to get more. So it's been going well, and we've had a few informational sessions. The Helena Ready for 100 organizing team has hosted them, and we've asked for feedback from folks during that and gotten really good feedback so far. There's been a lot of positive reception to the idea.
Well, it sounds to me like this has been a process that has respected all the different parties. We're not going down to burn Northwestern Energy down. We're talking with people in a civil way to try to change these policies for the good of our planet, for our children, for ourselves and our lives. So I want to thank you for being part of the Helena Ready for 100% project, Brian. My guest has been Brian Fady from the Montana Information Center here. He's part of Helena Ready for 100%. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.